Good afternoon, Floor. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk Leadership. Today, you're joining us. You're a transformational expert and coach with Playbook. And I'm happy as coach within FuturaFemina to talk with you because we have a similar background and also we have similar topics close to our hearts. And that's one of the reasons why I do this whole leadership series, is to talk about those subjects and to get them known and get people inspired and aware about certain topics. So let's go. Welcome.
Thank you. Sounds good.
Yeah, well, to kick off, we both are very into transformation of people and enterprises, companies. And we both come from a multinational or big company backgrounds and have changed into this area. And I was wondering whether is a good example you have, which basically makes the link to what you currently do.
So how I transitioned from corporate life to what I do now?
Princess, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Many stories in that area.
Yeah, we don't have to do all of them because we will have only 30 minutes.
No, we only have half an hour, I think, right? Well, I will start with a story that might help, who's ever is watching this as well, because we all love transformational stories, right? Where,
Exactly.
yeah, where the hero starts out and has like this big adventure and comes across these mentors and then has this quest for something and then comes out on top of that as a conqueror. And that's actually my story. I always call it the conqueror story. I became a conqueror, a victor, and I had my share of adversity, I have to say. So I started my career as a management trainee with ABN AMRO Bank, then the biggest bank of the Netherlands, and ended up as a management consultant, ended up working for the corporate board a lot, and then helped the CEO with lots of his strategies and speeches and stuff like that, how to communicate the strategy. And then he asked me, "Do you want to be director communications?" And it wasn't that question back then. It was, "Do you want to be head of communications?" Not yet the title. And I said, "No, thanks. I'm good." I love the strategy role. And yeah, and that's actually what I later learned is typical for women, that we tend to not always embrace the chances we get.
Yeah.
And this is just, this is a statistic that we tend to say, "No, I don't want to. I'm not good enough." Things like that. With me, I wasn't that I felt that I wasn't good enough, but I had a young daughter. I was pregnant at the time and then just came back. And I just thought, like, let's not take on extra responsibility.
Too
Let's
much
just,
in one go. Mm-hmm.
yeah, let's just focus on, getting a good work-life balance and stuff like that. So I came back and then I became head of communications. So that's how it goes. And in the end, I really embraced that role, became director of communications, so reported to the CEO, and I entered the political arena. And we had a survey last year for this company I partner with a lot. And we asked people, what is your biggest innovation challenge?
Yeah.
And maybe when you think of these kind of questions, what's your biggest challenge in innovating products? It doesn't matter really, innovating mindset even. Then you would think that things would pop up like, yeah, what's the most attractive market? How do you get, more sales in a new market? That wasn't it.
No.
The answer that most people gave was how to deal with internal politics.
Yeah.
That's, yeah, exactly how it went with me. So I thought I would have the chance to build a department, to build a strategy, to improve this department, transform this department. But in reality, I think 50-60% of my time I was playing in the political arena.
True.
And so here's the hero and the story, and where I also became a conqueror, because no good hero gets to the point of, you know, conquering everything without a good drama. And there was lots of drama, because yeah, my whole transformation of the department strategy didn't really turn out like I envisioned it would. And we ended up in a lot of resistance, frustration, that type of environment. And um, in the end, I actually got laid off. And I had a deep depression and anxiety disorder. I had developed that throughout the stress of all these years.
Yeah.
And yeah, I really had a breakdown, as they mention it. I also had a burnout, but that was never at that point not really diagnosed. So mentally, professionally, I was doing really well. I had the title and everything. Mentally, I was really doing very, very badly. And then ended up being laid off, which was, of course, fine because I needed to get out of that environment. But it took me a long time to find my emotional resilience again. And that's why I call it the story of becoming a conqueror. Yeah, lots of things happens, and many of the issues I lived through are still things that many people feel shamed about, and depression is still something that not many people like to talk about.
Yeah.
But in the end, I survived. I conquered it. And I think that's always now my main message, that you can become a conqueror if you want to.
Yeah, and I, you know, I recognize so much similarity in your story, because I had a situation like that, where I was involved into an enterprise, which led for me to end up in a burnout. So, you know, these are the very deeps, which also make you transform, which also for yourself start to recognize certain things about yourself, certain things about your environment, the typical dynamics which play into that. And that you see that whole picture. And the other part of your story, which I also do recognize, is those politics. You know, I made also a fast track career within Philips and DSM in this case. And I got to an executive position. And, you know, every time when you got a step further, the politics increased. But, you know, I wasn't really into that game, you know? I was really also still in the mode of let's work hard. Everything.
Yes.
You
I
know,
recognize that.
I see them playing those games, but I don't want to. But in the end, that's part of it. At least if you want to survive in that type of an organization, which also led me to actually leave the company. So. Because that wasn't me, and I was also going a little bit away from that, which I now recognize as being one of the symptoms of eventually also getting into a burnout, is that more and more I was doing things which were not true to me. So I was adapting to my environment, also a typical female thing.
Yes.
And yeah, I was doing great, just like you said, you know, the career, and you know, every time there was a step, more responsibility, bigger, da 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 da. So from the outer world it was fine, but in my inner world I was slowly leaving, let's say, parts of me behind. I sort of like a metaphor. Of course they were still there, but I was, let's say, yeah, not embracing them, not looking at them, not. And that's a lot of energy drained away. And that's one of the key things which I think you have to be sensitive to know, in corporate life at least, to be sensitive to politics. And if you want to play that game, play it and recognize it. But don't leave yourself behind whilst doing that. That's one of the things which I also typically, you know, give my clients and that framework. It's not bad to do that, do play that game, but it wasn't my thing. And I now have a version of it which I feel comfortable with, but that version back then really cost me a lot of energy in the end. And but it also made the opportunity to help other people bigger. And I think from our talks before, I see that in you and I see that in me, that because we went through all of those things and because you have the story of the conqueror, that makes you also being able to understand what those other factors are, what somebody's going through, and to help them better.
True. True. I love how you put that, by the way. It's it's really good advice to stay true to who you are. And I've actually looked into this also because I was wondering, and I think maybe some of the viewers might be wondering that as well. Why is that? Why is it so important to be true to who you are? And indeed, not being true to who you are leads to burnout, depression, all kinds of stress symptoms. But there's actually a reason for that. And um, I think what is important to realize is if you feel rejected for who you are, if you're afraid to be judged, you feel like you don't belong, you act in a way that you don't like. And I think that's what you were referring to as well in the political arena. Maybe you act more aggressive than you are, or dishonest, or self defeating behavior. These are all things that create severe stress in our bodies. And this is a chemical thing. So a biochemistry thing. It's not something that you can will away, wish away, because that's what also many people have been taught in the corporate world. If you want something bad enough, you can get it.
But in this case, but not always. Not in this area.
Really not true, because if your body starts working against you and start producing stress hormones constantly, you are not going to, you're not going to make it until you reach that goal, because your body will just simply reject it. And that's, I think, also one of the most important elements that I found after indeed this whole time of self-reflection, that as humans, it's not only better for us to be authentic and to act as who we are, it's actually essential. And it makes us feel joyful in our work. It makes us feel like we belong. We don't waste energy on stuff, we are comfortable voicing what we really want. And that is, I think, the real issue here.
True. And there is a lot more energy available as well. I mean, you get way more easily enthusiastic about things. So it's like a wheel of enforcement, it triggers even more. If you have fun doing what you do because you simply love it, it puts a whole other dynamic. Unless from the energy, like, I now want to, and let's go for that. Luckily, I must say my career has always been like, oh, great. I've also been asked for different positions. I was like, yeah, let's do that. And very interesting, at the time, I really didn't recognize, but now looking back and knowing also a little bit more about the backgrounds, like you also explored them, also that enthusiasm for the roles I've been in made me also create roles which I could, again, in my new role have. So typically, those were non-existing spots in the companies, but they were fitted to what I loved most doing. And that's perfect if you can create that. But if you want to have to fit into a mold, which is not truly you, then you go and look typically for things outside of your, in this case, because we're talking about work environment, you're going to look for those positive triggers elsewhere. So either, for instance, for recognition from your manager, because, it doesn't come from intrinsic motivation. So you have to have that external vibe, or from hobbies. Like, if you're truly only waiting for the weekend.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
Yeah, I see that also a lot. So that's why I mention it. You've seen it too?
Yes, and I totally agree with everything you say. And what I would like to add, and this is also something that the viewer or people who are interested in this topic might ask themselves. We are never really taught in our educational system, at least right now, how to be authentic, how to deal with emotions. Emotional resilience is not taught to us. Energy management is not taught to us.
No, no.
Stress management is not taught to us. But all these things can be learned. And I
Luckily.
think that's also one of the biggest misconceptions in corporate life right now, um, that we don't need to learn these things. So I think what I recognized when I was, still working in a corporate environment is that, so there's an issue, take a time management course. You're lacking motivation. Oh, just go and see what your purpose is or whatever, go and do something with that. But it's it's not really about these underlying capabilities that we need in order to survive the everyday pressure, the everyday, well, stress, also the everyday emotional conversations, and how to bounce back from them and how to behave in the best way. And that is a problem in my opinion. And also, and that's what I started with here, to add on what you were saying, and what the people that are watching this can ask themselves, is how do I really manage my energy right now?
Mhm.
And often we are taught that it's just the whole big picture.
Mhm.
Like you said, like, oh yeah, I need to de-stress in the weekend because during the week I don't have that much intrinsic motivation, but now I'm living to the weekend. But that's not how it works. That's not how we as human being work.
Yeah.
You need to look holistically at the whole system and see what you can do there. And I think that some companies, I've had the privilege to see Microsoft from the inside, and well, a couple of other companies that really did a lot on work life balance, a lot of research, and also like a lot of tests on that. And there's so many things that we can do to make people feel better. So even if it's not getting the joy out of their job, then still there's so many things. And if you look at me, I loved my job. I was able to advise the CEO on strategies because yeah, I love strategic consulting. I was able to write speeches, which I love, work with the media, all of these things I really, really loved. But there were so many other things that I didn't love. So it's not only about do you love your job, it's about the whole
The whole
system.
picture. Yeah, the whole
Yeah,
system.
definitely.
And indeed, also, to recognize all of those other parts, indeed, like you say, which are not being taught. It's competences. If they can be learned, true, but mostly more important is that layer beneath. That you really know yourself better. That I always also say, try to get to your core, but it's a very abstract thing. But if you really spend also time with yourself, and for me that has been part of doing meditations, getting into yoga for years before, all of those things, getting more interested in energy topics, how you use your breath. Luckily there are now more and more of these things available, and you can also then use them to manage a situation, but more importantly b to really get to know yourself better. And if you know that better, you can also, for instance, tell your environment clearer what you need and what you require to really flourish.
True. Oh, I was smiling when you said this because we could have another a full episode totally dedicated to this topic, but I will try and respond at least for a little bit. Um, for me, this happened by accident. So I had this little breakdown, as I like to call it, and I had to recover.
Mhm.
So I went to yoga 5 times a week or something like that, and in the end, I became a yoga nidra teacher. Yoga nidra works with the subconscious. It's called the sleep of the yogis. It works with the subconscious to make you really, really relaxed and get people really to turn inwards and experience their true selves. And as a result, I also became a meditation teacher. As a result, I became also really aware of what's going on subconsciously because I was doing all that. And what it made me realize, and that's why I was smiling. We could do a total new episode on that alone. Is something that's also been missing in corporate life, and it should be more embraced. And I feel that entrepreneurs are much more in the entrepreneur area, it's much more embraced. In the corporates, not so much, is working on your SQ. We are trained from young age on to work on our IQ and our intelligence, basically. Then there's a whole movement around EQ, emotional intelligence, but SQ, spiritual intelligence, however you define spirituality, I don't judge, I don't have a preference, but that is just as important because as humans, we're made of different layers. We're not only made of our brain and emotions, there's a sense of self there. And that can sound vague to you, that's okay, but it's still part of how we are wired.
Yeah.
So if you don't explore your SQ, what it means to you and how you can work with that, you're missing out.
Yeah.
And I will tell you one example where I intuitively embraced that, and my SQ journey went much further than that. But I want, again, we could do a total different episode on that. But one thing I realized when I started out my business, I wanted to train people to get on stage. And this might be you or some of the people listening. You want to be seen more, you want to be interviewed, you want to show your brand, personal branding, it's good for a career, all of that. So I started reaching out to people and saying, so do you want to be trained? I'm a former director of communications. I know how to tell a story. I know how to train you to tell a story. And what I found was quite surprising because it's actually not about the story when you go on stage. It's about your energy.
It's the vibe. Yeah.
Yes. When I now tell this story, you as the listener can hear whether or not I am speaking true to myself or not. You
Yeah.
can just feel it. This is the energy component. And I think almost everyone that I will tell this stories, even engineers who don't have nothing in common with, the whole
You
energy
know
and
when it's off. You might not know how and what, but you know
no,
it's how, but it's not truthful.
yeah, you feel some speakers have just great energy and you feel it is authentic to who they are, and that's what I wanted to teach people. And I could only teach them that by teaching them how energy works. And that is exactly how SQ is making a much bigger impact than we think. Because if you think also about the well-known iceberg, they always say feelings are below the surface. Everyone always uses the iceberg. Well, SQ is also below the surface. You can
Yeah.
feel when you enter a room if there's a good energy or not.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of my key stories, that I came into a room and this was in one company and I came into this meeting room. And sometimes I had this area like, oh God, I need to open up the doors and windows.
Yes, exactly that.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Really, that I had really had this feeling like no oxygen. And other times I didn't. And then I came to find out that there were certain people before me in that room every time I had it. So
Exactly.
if
That is the point.
they weren't even there anymore, but then you know that these are things, signs, things which are telling you something. And yeah, what was also very true is that these people, they were very negative for me, for my energy. Like I never felt comfortable in their presence. There was something, and even if they already left the room, but I still could notice it. There was still some of that energy left, and yeah, it's so important to look at those types of signals too, and and
Definitely.
and to be, yeah, some people say still enough, but perhaps connected to your body enough, uh, that you notice this as a signal and also respond to it. And I think that that is one of the let's say the tiny steps on such a journey as you just described, that you more and more understand what your body and everything around you, your own energy in connection to the energy of others, is telling you.
Yeah, you're fully right. I think also it's a beautiful example that you gave. One that I would not even often dare to mention because I would be afraid that people would think it's strange or something like that. But I definitely recognize it. That's why I take the very down to earth examples that everyone understands. But it's true. And science is also catching up. Neuroscience is every day showing us the impact of a lot of the spiritual dimension of humans and the impact they have on us. So yeah, it's definitely something that we need to, in my opinion, need to embrace. And I'm always happy to indeed contribute to that. And that's why I teach meditation. I don't do it that much anymore, but I do incorporate it in my programs and the subconscious work because I know that it can change people's lives. And yeah, and I really have to go and conquer all these prejudice that they have. I have some clients who just go like, no, meditation, that's just not, it's too vague. And I'm
Yeah.
like, no, it doesn't have to be vague. You just haven't had the right teacher. There are many different forms of meditation. Let's just find one that fits for you. And after a few months of working with me, they usually come and go like, that meditation offer, is that still on the table? Because
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
you made me
sometimes,
curious.
it's something new, and sometimes people, naturally at least, of new things typically are exciting to me, but I'm a little bit a strange person perhaps from that perspective, because
Yeah,
most
me too.
have
I'm
a
like,
have a
oh,
little
okay,
bit of
let's do
like, oh,
this.
oh, oh, there's something different. Oh, oh, this must be scary, there's
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah,
They
yeah.
have to have a little bit of time to get adjusted and to be open to it. But indeed, if you then take those tiny steps, also, one of those tiny steps in meditation is go for a walk in nature and just be with your dog. If I have a dog, so I take this example, be with the pet you have, for instance. Then you're truly in the moment, and those are the little steps which you can make to really, sense everything, make use of all your senses. Those are those steps which you can, and then of course, build onto that, so that you get to know more and more and more. But there's so much indeed to explore. Like you said, you just mentioned on your XQ journey, there's only just a small part of it, but there is so much to learn, and so much wisdom from, ancient cultures, and all of those things which are, let's say, rediscovered, which to me is very interesting. Lots of things which are now coming more and more, into the news, or getting to know. Those are basic principles which have been around for thousands and thousands of years. Even yoga, yoga is now a normal thing, but 50 years ago it wasn't. Like the position of women, for instance, all of these things are changing, and I think it's at least great, and that's also one of my driving forces is to be part of that stimulus, to share these types of examples, that it isn't weird, that it is common. I have my 2 feet on the ground. I'm practical. I also work with strategies for people and companies, but still that other aspects makes you way more stronger. That makes you whole, for lack of a better word. Because everybody has this inside themselves. It's sometimes because of all our cultural expectations and programming and everything which we have been taught. It's sometimes, I didn't get that attention anymore. I had to rediscover, for instance, my basic intuition, because I was so tuned by education and everything which I followed that everything had to be analytical.
True.
And when I combine these two, that's when you get real strength. You know when something is right, and then you have also this layer, okay, but I also can understand it. But the most important thing is the other way around, that you don't tell yourself that everything's okay because you have been thinking about it, but there's something off. Because I have that example as well, that I did something where I actually got ill and still did it. And in the end thought, well, there was a reason why I got ill at that moment.
True. Yeah, I think it's also, again, beautiful examples that you gave. What I find really fascinating, and that's what my research showed in the last years, because I read everything, like literally everything I can get my hands on, I read it. And I've read a lot of the spiritual, I've even read the Yoga Sutras, which is not easy literature.
Wow.
The
Haven't been there yet.
Bible, everything. So I looked at all of it from all different perspectives. And this is also what characterizes me as a person, because I don't like to just say, oh yeah, SQ or spirituality or energy is important because that's the new like yoga, that's the new trend or something. I like to see how it really, why it works.
Yeah, me too.
And for example, meditation, I read, I think, like 50 books on meditation just to figure out why it works and what it is that fits with our brains, because that's basically it. And what we see now, and I've mentioned it, I think, in the previous question also a little bit, what we see is that modern science increasingly proves a lot of the ancient wisdom. And it has just real benefits. And that's why I explained also the term SQ. And if people take one thing away from this conversation, I really think it should be that develop your SQ, because it has so many benefits and it has been so underrepresented in our educational system. And as you said, it has such big impact on us. And the most amazing thing to me is that almost all the top performers in the world, so like big well-known entrepreneurs, athletes, these kind of types, they all have developed their SQ and work with spiritual principles. All of them. There's really not one who doesn't do that. So it's like the best kept secret of optimal performance, and it's leaking. The secret is out.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have people like Stephen Kotler, who did a lot on flow research, and HeartMath Institute, who did a lot on hearts, that it actually makes us smarter if we connect to our hearts. Our intuition is in our hearts. All science stuff that shows how important it is for us as humans. So yeah, I think it's time we embrace that.
Super. Well, I see that also time is already flying.
Also, yeah, I was like,
so perhaps we can leave the viewers or listeners, because can also basically listen to this without having us in the picture, with a final tip, perhaps to start that SQ journey for themselves. What would be the ultimate tip to do in that case?
Oh, that's a good and difficult question. Um, yeah, I would say a regular meditation practice definitely is a must have for all of us, especially with these lifestyles. We need it, our brains need it to get rid of instant gratification. And maybe I should leave it at that, but I want to say a lot about intuition because that for me is also very important, need getting to the core of who you are. But if it's just one,
Oh no,
that,
you can also give 2, 3 tips. I
oh,
mean,
that
it's
was
not restricted.
no, you have to do a regular meditation practice to get rid of the instant gratification, and that will help you not be led by your smartphone or other things. So that's one. And the other one is make it a daily habit to tune in with your intuition. There are many techniques for that. You can email Sasha or myself, if you need to know how, but it's really very easy. There are many techniques for that. And if you start every day just tuning in into your intuition, you will really experience, yeah, I want to say miracles happen, but it's true, you get so much more in touch with who you are, what you want and what you don't want. So just for like 10-15 minutes a day, maybe when you get up or before you go to bed, that will make um, all the difference.
Yeah.
And the third tip, then, I'm gonna leave it at three because you're like, oh no, that's another 10
No,
minutes.
no, no. I mean, it's
Um,
worthwhile. I'll be sure they will listen for 5 minutes more.
the third tip that has to do indeed with energy, um, and this is one of my, they sometimes call it, I think, pet peeves. It's one of these strange things that you have which is really common to you. And for me, that is, I do not like the term HSP, they call it in Dutch, highly sensitive persons. In English is also HSPs, but okay. um, because I believe we're all highly sensitive, so ditch that term and just explore your energy in many ways. You explore your sensitivity, explore your emotions. We are all sensitive being, and yes, on a scale from 0 to 100, some are more gifted than others, but it could also be many other things. It doesn't have to be only highly sensitive. There are also, yeah, you could be psychic, for example, and that's what some people fail to find out, and as a result their energy is drained. So that's maybe my third tip, which is substantial, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, sensitivity is something which we all have.
Yes.
Sometimes we have to get in tune to it and really to discover it and let it grow. But it's something we all have. That feeling that it's something is off. That's the first sign of sensitivity.
Yes, and that's why, because I don't want to come across as mean or something. So I do want to apologize a little bit, because I know some people really identify strongly with highly sensitive person. I it's just, and that's why it makes me always a little bit agitated. There's so much more to explore in the area of sensitivity and emotions. Just don't stick to the label, but be open to explore it a little bit wider. That's the only thing. And if you want to call yourself that, that's totally fine. But yeah, be open.
Yeah, be open, open for opportunities to grow. That's really one of my core things. Growth is always a great thing, and for that you have to be open, be curious, and explore new things. So well, thank you, Floor. Time
Do
flies.
you have an SQ development tip?
Sorry.
Do you have an SQ development tip?
Yeah, it's those little nudges. Explore them. uh,
Yeah,
so what is it? Why did it feel off? uh, why what is holding me back? I'm ticking all of the boxes, but still I'm hesitant to do something.
nice. Yeah,
What is that?
I recognize that. Yeah.
you know and those are those little things. I get goosebumps like this side too. I get goosebumps while I'm saying this, and to me that's the biggest affirmation that I'm totally voicing a truth which is so big that everybody needs to hear it.
True.
And that's one of my signs. So I listen to that one.
Sure. Great.
Thank you for your time, Floor.
Yeah,
everybody.
same here. Thanks. This was fun.
Yeah, it is.
We can do this next week again, and we can have a new topic. This was like easy breezy.
We can actually. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it some other time again. Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure, and speak to you soon, Floor. Bye-bye.